An ellipsis, or plural ellipses, is basically a set of three spaced periods, and we use these to skip over a part of a quotation. So it's a really handy tool to have, but we do want to make sure that we use it properly. And to explain how to use an ellipsis properly, we'll have a look at this little poem here, and then we'll talk about how we can incorporate bits of it, as well as some critical opinion about it in our own writing. So this poem by the fictional Thomas Prendergast goes, "The foulest of the foul has got to be the owl. The owl eats mice. It even tastes them twice. Want to see? Go stand beneath its tree." All right, so we have our first first quotation here with an ellipsis in it. And you can see that our ellipsis skips a little bit of this quotation. So we have the foulest, and then we have the owl eats mice. So we have this little bit here as well. But there is a problem with this, because if we put the ellipsis here, then even though syntactically it still makes sense, it's still a complete sentence, it's not really being fair to the original text. We've changed the meaning. In the original text, every owl is said to eat mice, but here it's the foulest owl that eats mice. And so we have to be very careful when we quote from a text that we don't actually change the meaning by using ellipses. So this one is definitely incorrect, although some features of it are on the right track. So for instance, if we use an ellipsis in dealing with poetry and we get to the end of a line, so we're skipping from one line to a different one, we don't have to use this slash that we typically use in separating different lines of poetry, at least in these kind of shorter quotations that are just 2 or 3 lines long. Now, if we have a longer quotation, so a block quotation, and we skip an entire line, then what you can do is you can add this spaced or this set of periods all the way across. And in fact, if you're following the MLA guidelines, I think they would suggest that you keep going and going and going, but all the way to the end of the line. But I think that looks a little bit ugly, and I would be completely fine with just sort of matching it up with the end of the other lines by and large. Now, if you look at the rest of this quotation, you can see that it does make sense. So we have Prendergast suggests that nature should be experienced, not just read about. And then we have the foulest of the foul has got to be the owl. Want to see? Go stand beneath its tree. And we can take out those middle lines then, because the rest of it still makes sense. And that's really what you want to watch out for. Now, there is this colon here as well, and you can see here that the colon isn't quite strictly necessary, and maybe the syntax has changed. So we could perhaps get rid of that as well. Okay, we could drop the colon. And because we have all of these dashes here already, or sorry, periods here already, it's probably fine just not to add extra periods over here. So, that looks a little bit funny. So in this case, I think I would probably just take the colon off and put the periods here. As you can see then, there are lots of tricky situations like that where you can't be quite sure sometimes what the right thing is to do, but on the whole we just want to make sure that we use periods to show where we have omitted information. It used to be the case actually that these periods were in square brackets. So the MLA guidelines suggest that you use square brackets to really show that any periods or any addition to the quotation is your own. And that's no longer necessary, okay? But it can now happen that you're quoting and the quotation itself already has an ellipsis too, and that gets a little bit tricky. So what you can do then, let's say the original quotation had some dots, you can actually add a little note to your citation at the end. You could say something like, first ellipsis in the original, or is original, or whatever kind of phrase you think would clarify that the one ellipsis is not yours and the other one is. So that's just one suggestion to kind of work around this problem. Then we have dealing with prose quotations, and we have a fairly long critical passage here. Obviously, this is too long for just a regular quote. It should be a block quote, but we're going to work with it anyway, so it will probably change. Now, if we take this first little bit here, the first sentence, we're just going to copy this and we'll paste it further down. Scroll down a bit. It's fairly easy to take some stuff out. So we write, as Peter Nimrod writes, Thomas Prendergast's poem, The Owl, blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe we want to take out this whole middle piece because it's a bit of a digression and it doesn't pertain to our point. Then we can use an ellipsis and we'll make sure that our periods are spaced. And now you can see that the syntax follows very nicely here. So Thomas Prendergast's poem remains a profound meditation. You can see that even though we took stuff out, it still flows nice and smoothly. At the end, of course, we want to make sure we add our citation back in. So we'll do that for a moment. And there we go. If we want to quote something from this passage and we want to skip more than just a part of one sentence, we need to make sure that we add an extra period. And I'll show you how that works. Actually, we'll just do it right here. So let's take out this whole middle piece here. And this whole part is sort of critical opinion, kind of nonsensical. But it's critical opinion that deals with some dispute that various critics have. And maybe it's not relevant to what we're saying, so we're going to skip over it. What you can see now is that because this sentence ends here, we actually have an extra period. We have a period for the end of the sentence, and then we have our 3 periods, our ellipses, to show that we have skipped over a passage. So that's the difference between these two examples. The one has just 3 and the other one has 4, and that's because we ended a sentence there. Just something to watch out for, but on the whole, using ellipses is, I think, fairly straightforward. You just need to make sure that what you skip, or the stuff that's left after you skip a passage still makes sense together, and that you respect the integrity of the original thought, and that your new quotation doesn't change the meaning.